Welcome to Second Chance Cinema, which is a production of Harvard Square Scriptwriters. Tonight we'll be looking at some more movies that you've probably never seen. Our theme is road trip movies, and we've got two wild ones for you. The first one will be Badlands, directed by Terrence Malick, made in 1973, and Tu MAMA TAMBIEN, which actually translates into And Your Mother Too, a film made by Alfonso Cuarón. So I'd like to start by introducing our panel. First we have Bob Tremblay, who is a film critic for Metro West. Then we have film editor, filmmaker Rodrigo Monterrey, who probably got to watch one of these movies in his native language, so that had to have been pleasant. And then we have Joel Karlinski. He's an award-winning scriptwriter and a pulmonologist and saves lives. The first one will be Badlands. And anybody want to talk a little bit about the main actors in this? We had for the lead, playing a 15-year-old girl,
Sissy Spacek. And then playing the leading man is Martin Sheen, who's playing a 25-year-old, but he was around 33 at the time. And it's his first leading role, I believe, in a movie. So it was a big breakthrough for him. And it's an amazing performance.
And I can't help but wonder if part of the reason they chose him, because this was based on a real life story, right, that took place in 1959, as I recall, it was his incredible resemblance at that time to James Dean,
Correct.
right?
Yes.
And so it seemed as though people responded to him as a rebel without a cause, and certainly the character in this movie seems to be a rebel without a cause. So Sissy Spacek plays a character in this movie. This is her second film, right?
Correct, after Prime Cut.
And she was how old when she made it?
About, she was born in 1949, so she was like 24 when she made it. And she talked about how she realized that the artistic side of films by making this movie. And she's amazing in the role.
So this is a movie that starts slow and moves into a wild road trip, as we alluded to, based on a real life story about a psychopath and the young woman who he loves.
In actuality, Starkweather just didn't kill the father. He wiped out her entire family.
Yeah.
The stepmother,
The little daughter,
too.
sister,
Sissy.
Yeah.
You know, so he was a lot more vicious than they portray him in the movies.
First we see that the character, I don't know, it's interesting we don't remember his name.
His Kit Carruthers.
Kit Carruthers.
Kit and Holly.
Holly.
Right,
And
Holly.
there's a great line where he says, "Name's Carruthers. I shoot people. Not that I should get a medal."
Right,
Yeah.
right.
I love that line.
We see that this is already a fish out of water, an outlier who can't keep a job. And I thought I would show you guys the clip now that I think is the first inciting incident.
I got a job throwing garbage. I'm not in love with the stuff, okay?
That's my father. I gotta run.
Well, hey, wait. When am I gonna see you again?
Well, I know what my dad's gonna say.
What?
Can I be honest?
Sure.
Well, that I shouldn't be seen with anybody that collects garbage.
He knows that he isn't fitting in anywhere else, and he's going to be rejected here as well. And if you remember, he does go and talk to the father.
Yeah, he tries.
Right?
He tries.
He goes to the, he was painting the sign, he goes over and tries to reason with him. It's understandable. I mean, if you're the father and this man has no education, no job, he's not exactly someone that you say, oh yes, this is the dream man for you, and he probably gets some kind of vibe, but he's probably not all there. You know,
Yeah.
to begin
I think he's
with.
also probably thinking, my daughter's is 15. She should be seeing boys in school, not this, stranger adult. But he spends the rest of the movie collecting and going through garbage,
Collecting
and no, not collecting bodies, like picking up little things. In fact, they go to a rich man's house and he grabs this hat, Panama hat, that is just like the hat that her dad was wearing. So there's something, I think, there that about his behavior. I always felt very removed. There was no emotion. There was something very distant about them, both of them. Even though he's very charming and charismatic and exudes a certain confidence, none of it feels like really deep. Everything feels very
Flat.
Flat, yeah.
The delivery,
which is very scary
Yeah.
almost, right?
Well, Genine, do you think they were in love?
well, I wanted to talk about this whole narration thing. Both these movies have narration. And again, as storytellers, it's really interesting to look at what purpose they serve. In this movie, we have these characters who are emotionless, and yet she delivers content that is very powerful, even sometimes very emotional in the words, but also in a very flat way. And so the second clip that I chose was just an example of that whole bizarreness, where she's talking about him, she's talking about Kit, and we see some shots of him at work and wherever, and we can take a look at it.
And some of the stuff he did was strange. For instance, he faked his signature whenever he used it to keep other people from forging important papers with his name. And as he lay in bed, in the middle of the night, he always heard a noise like somebody was holding a seashell against his ear. And sometimes he'd see me coming toward him in beautiful white robes, and I'd put my cold hand on his forehead.
They're two outliers drawn to each other. He commits this terrible crime. It is very much like Bonnie and Clyde, and they have no one else. And so, I mean, that whole notion, they live in a tree fort for all that period of
There's
time.
a certain childlike aspect
That's
to,
right.
Yes.
to the way things are.
Why do they call it Badlands? Why is the title of the movie Badlands?
Because they're driving through the
Through the
Badlands.
Badlands.
I
Yeah.
don't know that that's...
They keep referencing the geography.
Yeah.
I know that, but
And obviously,
they're bad. I mean,
and yeah.
they're bad, and yeah, the scenery, the environment is desolate. I mean, the town that they moved to, in a sense, is desolate. You don't see a lot of people walking on the streets. It's just basically the two of them and the father. There's no one around.
That's interesting that you're saying that. I do think that in all of Terrence Malick's movies, he's so concerned with humans in the world, in a way. So he places his characters in the context of nature. And, from Tree of Life to, in all of his movies, which is why
Right.
they're so visually powerful.
Yeah.
And I think that nature usually overwhelms and overpowers in such a huge scale, human problems.
We're going to look at one more clip, which I think is a turning point in the film. And after we look at that clip, I want to talk on the subject of sex with these characters. But first, I would like to look at this clip, because to me, this was where, like we always talk about reversals in movies. Up until that point, we sort of go along with the notion that every character is a threat to them. And then he has this friend who has, Cato, I think, who is giving them shelter. And they're playing in a field, his field, by his home, and let's look at what happens.
You missed.
You're pissing.
Hey, you're throwing big ones.
Ho, ho! Kato! The shovel's in the truck.
There's something very polite about him.
Yeah.
He lets people know, I have a
Yeah.
gun. And with Cato, he helps him up. He
Yeah.
walks him inside. He holds the door for
Yeah.
him. He's got these manners, these very polite manners when he's doing these brutal
He
acts.
never lets go of the gun because he knows everybody he meets is going to turn him in if they can.
Yeah.
Well,
Right?
you
He
can
never lets-
clearly tell by his body
but-
that he's going to be. That's what he's doing.
Yeah.
Going to turn him in. He also knows that he's going to be captured at the end. When she leaves him does he give himself up, in a sense. He could have continued running. But when she leaves, the party's over.
The rejection that he gets from her initially about what her dad's going to say, I think emboldens him to want to go after her.
But they're asexual.
But
they don't have sex.
I
Well, they
agree.
do.
It's a totally asexual.
I think they are
relationship.
asexual.
No, actually, there is a scene where they do have sex.
No.
Oh, yeah, there is, because there's a scene
No.
by the river, and she says, "Is that all there is?"
That's right. That's right.
Oh,
That's right.
okay.
And
So I really want,
so-
and that to me is a very important scene,
Yeah.
because this is a 25-year-old man. So he's at the height of his virility. And she is this young girl who's supposedly in love. She's just run off with him. Or has she even run off yet? I don't think she has
Not
at
yet.
that
Not yet,
juncture.
yeah.
And I'm going to contrast this with the other movie
Yes.
where it is hormones galore,
I know.
right, on
Yeah.
the part of
Yeah,
all
yeah.
the characters.
Yeah.
And it's clear that there's no love expressed. Really, they never say "I love you." I don't think that word is ever mentioned. So it's interesting to see, well, what is the relationship based on? I think she's just bored out of her mind, and this is the first guy who showed interest in her, and she gets a chance to move out of her dull town where she clearly wasn't the most popular girl. I think she mentions that she did lack that popularity.
But there's not even lust, as I think of it, in people that
lust.
age.
No.
So it's a mysterious
Yeah.
relationship
Yeah.
in that regard.
But I think it relates to their flatness in general.
Yeah.
It's an emotional flatness across the board. I think that the Badlands is a representation also of their internal place.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The music in this movie is very unusual. This is a movie that is incredibly dark, and then you get this xylophone stuff going back and forth on you here. And then, if that's not bizarre enough, when the house is burning down, he plays the music of Carl Orff. And if that's not bizarre enough, then they're dancing to Sylvia, making Sylvia.
And the reference there.
Love is Strange.
Right.
Yeah.
And then
Right.
an artist he likes, they play Nat King Cole.
All right, so we're going to wrap up the first half of this discussion. We can take a look at ratings at the end, compare the two films. We'll be back and discuss Y Tu Mama Tambien. See you in a minute. Welcome back to the second half of our road trip show. In this segment, we'll be taking a look at the Mexican film Y Tu Mama También. This was a film made by Alfonso Cuarón and his brother, who was Carlos. And they made this film after Alfonso had already had quite a bit of success in Hollywood. He had made A Little Princess, he had made Great Expectations, and for whatever reason, he wanted to return to his roots of Mexico and make a film with his brother that he described as the film he would have made before he went to film school. He knew that he wanted to make a road trip movie, he knew that he wanted it to be about young men, and he wanted to take a look at Mexican culture, and he certainly did all of those things. So we can start perhaps with talking about the three main actors. It's kind of an interesting story. One of them was in fact Spanish. Maribel Verdú, Diego Luna, and the third was Gael Garcia Bernal. I believe one of them was kind of already a heartthrob in Mexico, right? And so that was a question in casting. Should they have a heartthrob in a movie like this, where it's pretty rough, and there's a lot of vulnerability shown on the part of these two young men. It concerns men of, I guess you'd say, somewhat different socioeconomic means. Tenoch, who is from a very wealthy political family, and Julio, who lives in what we would call, I suppose, in the United States, a high-rise, maybe even it's not clear to me if it's a housing project, but something very minimal, with his mother and his sister, who's a left-wing activist, which is another interesting little side story. And they are, I presume, friends from school. It's kind of the interesting thing of, we can talk endlessly about this, but they're Spanish Mexicans, not mestizos, so you've got that whole piece of it. They're very white looking. They probably go to a private school. That's how they know one another. And they're coming out of, I guess, high school into college, and it's about to be a really boring summer. And they go to a wedding where they meet a beautiful young woman. She's clearly older than them. And married, which they discover. So they've had plenty to drink already at this wedding. We see that it's the wedding of vastly wealthy people. The president of the country is there. And they, you know, are feeling their oats, I guess you'd say, because their girlfriends have both just left for Italy for the summer. So who are they going to be with? And they're horny as all get out. So in the first clip, there's sort of what I call the introduction. You've already kind of described it. The look, right? It's certainly not across the room.
Ah, no, además la playa que nosotros vamos es una playa donde nada más los pescadores de la zona, nada más.
¿Y cómo se llama?
Boca de qué es? Del cielo. Boca del cielo. A huevo. Es hermosísimo, no sabes qué playa. ¿Cuál paraíso, güey? Es el mismito cielo, pero vuelto mar. Vuelto trópico. Bueno, acá es como una mordidita así de nube y cielo, pero acá. Pero acá en la tierra, echando su raíz. Oye, pues podría venir ella, ¿no? Claro, ¿por qué no vienes con nosotros?
The dialogue is so fast.
And slangy.
And slangy.
It's I want to say so much slang and local, you know, Mexico City slang. So in that sense, I think it was a brave choice to just have them speak the way these kids would speak, because in other countries, Spanish-speaking countries, we don't use any of those expressions.
The original script that Carlos and Alfonso penned was extremely minimalist. They basically had a little bit more than what we as story writers or storytellers would call an outline. I mean, I'm sure there was on the page what was happening in the scenes and some of the things they wanted them to say, but during the rehearsals and then subsequently when they shot, they encouraged them to go with it and also to improvise.
But it also requires great acting to pull that off.
Absolutely.
And these are just all very talented
Incredible.
actors.
And brave.
And brave, because some of the things that they're improvising, it works.
And
it
also,
doesn't
I
seem
think
first. I mean, they're talking over each other almost like His Girl Friday, which was scripted, but it's just amazing. One of the more interesting aspects that we're probably going to get to it is in the difference in narration. And in here we have Sissy Spacek providing her flat narration. Here we have the omniscient narration who is telling people. What's fascinating about this, without getting into too much detail, is virtually every single thing that the narrator says in this movie is a total downer. I mean, he never says anything. I mean, they show a body on the side of the street. The narrator tells him how this body got here. I mean,
hold that thought for 1 minute, because I want to talk about the 3 plot lines in this movie. And I want to say what plot line that narrator satisfies most of the time. The first plot line is obviously the relationship between these 2 boys and where that will go as coming out of high school, which was a great equalizer for them. What does it mean for the preppy and, you know, the campesino, or however he perceives his friend, to go their separate ways? What's going to happen? That's plotline 1. Plotline 2, of course, is the relationship between Luisa and Llano, her husband, which we will be looking at a critical clip related to that in 1 sec. But the third plotline, which I found buried in an obscure film review, is what the Cuarón brothers are doing with this movie politically. This movie is full of bits and pieces of juxtaposition between the wealthy and those who have nothing.
Even though these are the best of friends and they grew up together, no matter how long and how close they are, there's still that class difference that's almost impossible to wring out of them. There's the scene where whenever he went over to Julio's house, he would lift up the toilet seat with his foot.
Which he does later in the movie.
In a seedy hotel, he does the same thing because, hey, you know, sorry, I'm still, I'm still a wealthy guy and I don't do this kind of stuff.
The character of Kit in Badlands is also sort of modeling himself after his ideal, which is James Dean. And these boys also have an ideal of the man, which is the all-powerful sort of stud, right? Who
I'm horny all the time.
Right,
and also on the diving board.
Always masturbating and always fantasizing. But they have this idea of what it is to be a man and who they want to see themselves as. And then in fact, the movie brings them into confronting that with each other,
Correct.
with Luisa.
Yes.
I really want to take a moment and look at a clip in which we explore that plot line about Luisa, because I don't want to lose the Luisa thread in our discussion. So in this clip, Luisa is awakened by a phone call from Yano, who is away at some university
Her
thing.
husband.
Her husband,
Her
Hano.
husband.
Regreso en 2 días. Te quiero un chingo.
Yo también, Jano, te quiero mucho.
Soy un
Jano.
pendejo. Te juro que soy una mierda.
Bueno, vete a dormir, que estás borracho, ¿vale? Jano, tranquilo. Jano, ¿qué te pasa? Jano, ¿estás bien, cariño?
Es que me acosté con otra. Te digo que soy una mierda. Luisa.
So the thing that is so striking to me about this is, we've seen in the previous scene, the boys were inviting her to Boca del Cielo, and now here she was, saying, "Oh, I'm sure Hana would love to go. I'm a faithful wife." And then we have this situation where clearly this is what I call the inciting moment for her. Her husband is confessing he has been unfaithful, and what is she going to do? She's going to be there, he'll supposedly be back in 2 days, but she has this opportunity, invited to go off to the beach. Will she do it now?
But it clearly upsets her, and it is the inciting incident. If there's no phone call there, it's highly unlikely that she would have gone off with the two
Exactly.
boys.
Coming back to the subject of the socioeconomic disparity, the next clip I thought we could look at is one in which they are now on the road in their, free-spirited way. They have their organization's name, Charolastas Manifesto, right? Charolastas Manifesto with all the rules.
Yeah.
And it seems like one of the rules is be high every day, right? So they are getting high with Luisa. And they come to this community, and we see a real contrast to the ridiculous argument they're having about sex, of course. So let's take a look at how these two classes vary.
Este cabrón no ha cogido más que con su vieja, ¿no?
No es cierto, güey.
Ay, ¿con quién, puto?
Con Flavia, cabrón.
Ay, no mames, con Flavia, güey. Mira, a Flavia, este cabrón, se estaba poniendo el condón y justo se lo estaba poniendo y se vino. Tú me contaste, mujer.
¿Qué es eso?
Güey.
Una cooperación para la reina.
La cooperación.
¿Y tú, Tenat?
¿Yo qué?
¿Que si has hecho el amor con algunas? Ay, gracias. Además de con tu novia.
Pues 2 que 3.
Sí, 2 que 3 huilas, güey.
¿Qué es Willa?
Sí, son putas.
¿Sí? ¿Vais de puta? Nada, que vuestra reina está muy guapa, ¿eh?
Yo le diré puto.
Ay, sí. Eres bien putañero, bien putañero.
Para nada, para nada, no.
That's a great scene. I love
It
it.
is.
Because, so they're arguing, well, one is teasing the other about how he's only had sex with his girlfriend. He says, no, I've had with others. And then with who? And he has a moment where you're not sure, so you're not sure if he's bluffing or if he's something he's not saying. And then he starts teasing the other guy, saying, well, but you've only had sex with your girlfriend, and whores, prostitutes.
You have the cultural richness, but you also have, these young men are so indulged that all they can, do is smoke dope all day and debate who's had more sex.
It is also a coming-of-age movie.
Yeah.
Yes.
On top
Yeah,
of it, because
absolutely.
they grow as the movie goes on from 2 horny kids that all they care about is having sex, and they see this woman as, we're just going to bang the hell out of her. Can I say that? Anyway, it becomes
Yes.
more than that.
Yes.
They almost become men.
Okay.
She teaches them.
Yes.
Exactly.
So this last clip is, I keep advocating for Luisa. Maybe it's the fact I'm the only female on this.
No, she's great.
No,
yeah,
she's amazing.
Is her arc in this. And in this last clip that we're going to look at, Luisa has been listening to all this nonsense, arguing has greater sexual prowess, and she is also, as we know, engaged in some intimate behaviors with them. And now they are in this ridiculous fight. And look at how Luisa responds to this.
¡Cabrón! ¡Chinga tu madre, güey!
¡Culios de mierda!
¡A la verga!
¡Mátale, güey!
¡Me la pelas, naco!
¡Iros a tomar por culo a la mierda!
¡Vete a la verga!
¡Cámaras, gilipollas! Pensé que erais distintos, pero sois las mismas bestias. ¡Qué manifiesto ni qué charolastras de mierda! Si ni siquiera respetáis vuestros propios mandamientos. Como todos los tíos, marcando territorio y dándoos de hostias cuando lo único que os gustaría sería follar el uno con el otro. ¡Eso es lo que os gustaría! ¿Qué más da si os habéis acostado con la novia del otro? ¿Qué más da, coño, con lo rápido que os corréis los dos? ¡Mierda! ¿Quién me manda, coño? Críate con críos y limpiarás pañales.
That is an awesome
That's
line.
great.
Play with babies, you end up washing
Question.
diapers. Absolutely fabulous line. And that's it. She's obviously the mature one. I mean, she's lived, she's older, she's lived a longer life. She's gone through a lot more than these boys have certainly have gone through, and they're gonna have to grow up.
But here's the thing I want to say about Luisa's arc, because I know we didn't even get into this. I feel like there's almost no character arc in the characters in Badlands, which is interesting. In Luisa, everyone in this has a very dramatic arc. And Luisa's arc, when she starts out, the wife of Hano, she's taking care of her auntie. She became a dental hygienist because that was the only thing she could do to make money and be at home. She's an orphan, etc. And you get the sense everything has always been controlled by others, and she's been the wife of Hano, etc. And so now, here we have this situation where she really turns around and changes things and takes a stand. So what do we think about these movies? Do we think other people should go see them?
Definitely. Absolutely. They're great movies.
Okay.
Both of them.
You're seeing two of the great directors who go on to make other great movies. Certainly Malick, with his next movie would be Days of Heaven, and Cuarón. Actually, his next movie I think is the Harry Potter film. But which, by the way,
great.
Which by the
Excellent.
way, in my
That's great.
opinion, is the best Harry Potter
It
film.
is the best Harry Potter film.
Because he's just an incredible talent,
Yeah.
and he's one of the big, three from Mexico, along with Del Toro and Iñárritu.
Right.
They're just amazing talents from this country.
You should definitely rent these, stream these, steal them, borrow them from the library, or whatever you can do. And thanks for joining us tonight for our road trip movies.